Hi, everyone, and thank you for joining us at the Legal HR Summit. The Legal HR Summit is a two-day online event hosted by Jus Laboris, the largest employment law alliance in the world. This session is part of the Europe block and will be followed by other curated sessions of the region. I am then turning over to Valeria Morosini to begin the session. Go ahead, Valeria, you can start.
Thank you very much, Annie. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining our session. Welcome. My name is Valeria Morosini. I'm from Toffoletto De Luca Tamayo, the Italian member firm of Jus Laboris. And with me, Wout Bouyke from Kleijs & Engels, the Belgian member of Jus Laboris. And we are happy to discuss today restructuring in Europe with two representatives from major organizations, GE and Beckert.
If I may introduce in the first place Jeroen Bors. If you search for an expert in multi-jurisdiction with multi-jurisdiction experience, then we have find the right person. So Jeroen, you have the floor if you can share some ideas or facts on your role and experience in this field. Thank you very much. You're still on mute, Jeroen.
Yeah. Yes, okay. You've unmuted me. Hey, good afternoon. So my name is Jeroen Bos. I work for GE. I am a HR business partner covering the EMEA region. One of the tasks that I have is also looking after restructuring on a European level. For us, that means besides having to deal with country works councils, country labor unions where applicable, we also have a European Works Council in that sense. And the reason for that is twofold. One, there's a legal obligation. And second, whenever and wherever we make changes, they typically have impact on a global scale and therefore on a European scale. So it's a means for us to coordinate any and all restructuring throughout Europe, starting at the top at European level and down trickling down to country level, if you will. As most companies, we are in a bit of a tough spot today. COVID hasn't helped. So we've had our fair share of restructuring. And that's, I think, where some of my expertise comes from.
Thank you.
We also have the company Beckert. You may know Beckert. It's the leader in steel wire transformation. And Roberto Secchi, currently general manager for rubber transformation in Slovakia, and he was the former general manager of the Italian legal entity that went through a major restructuring during the last 2 years. That was very well known because it attracted huge media and political attention. It was during the elections, so it was easily used by politicians to use it as a symbol of foreigners buying Italian excellence and then shutting down the plant and dismissing the people. So it looked as a great opportunity to show how politics could save employment. And that's why they even issued special pieces of legislation to support the case and to support employment in Beckert matter. So that meant a huge involvement of any type of institution and authorities and local authorities and ministries and of course unions and medias and so on. So Roberto, how was your experience in Italian restructurings?
Yeah, well, thank you, Valeria, and hi everyone. Let me introduce myself. I'm Roberto Secchi. I'm from Italy, and actually I'm responsible for the operation in Slovakia, in which we have the biggest platform of rubber reinforcement. There are two units. One produces mostly rubber reinforcement product, steel cord and bead wire, everything you have inside your tires. And the other unit produces a building product. At that time of the restructuring, I was covering the country manager Italy position. In Italy, we had two production units. One was in Figline, the ones which was affected by the restructuring, and the second one is in Cagliari. The two production units employed 250 in Cagliari, 365 before restructuring in Filiine and the sales office in Italy. So the restructuring took place the 22nd of June 2018. So we are talking about 2 years ago, and the restructuring is still ongoing, unfortunately, because we have so many things ongoing, even thanks or due to COVID. It depends on the view you see. So the communication affected 318 employees, and they were more or less all affected of this. So maybe we can have later more time to discuss in detail what happened.
Sure, and as I said, that we want to discuss restructuring in Europe and across Europe. So particularly want to consider situations where you have to manage a project that is affecting several jurisdictions at the same time, where timings for the processes can differ from country to country. Legal constraints are different from country to country. You may need to involve the European Works Councils, and you may have, a certain number, a huge number, I would say, of legal constraints to consider that are different from a jurisdiction to another. And just take the example of Italy in this moment. We have a dismissal ban, meaning that redundancies, whether they are collective or individuals, they cannot be implemented in this moment. So we have many clients managing huge global restructuring projects in this moment where Italy would be affected actually, but cannot be completely part of the project because again, redundancies cannot be implemented. So think of the complexity in managing communication in these situations where you have a country that is part of the project, but where you cannot go ahead with these aspects. So we know we don't want to consider only legal aspects, right?
That's correct,
Yeah.
Valeria. Maybe if indeed, if we talk about when we did the brainstorming on this session, we talked about the legal aspects, but as everybody knows, as lawyers, we can talk for hours on all the legal aspects, but then we would lose out of sight the added value of Jeroen and Roberto that we have here during the session. So we will talk not only about the legal aspects, but we will also try to talk about the human, the cultural aspects of any multi-jurisdiction restructuring, because as everybody knows, the social consultation, it may mean it may be the same words, but it's not the same content, of course, in the Netherlands compared to Italy, compared to France, compared to Belgium, or even Norway. So let's also tackle some cultural differences for HR managers when you have to deal with such international restructurings. And I think maybe Valeria, you will talk first about some legal aspects that our clients, HR managers, should face during these international projects, right?
Yes, actually, I would love to hear from you, Jeroen. What's your experience in managing projects affecting different jurisdictions with different timings? And I seem to understand you have experience in this.
Sure, and this is where the timing and the sequencing becomes complex. Why? And I take our example, right? We start at the European level. We have a consultation affecting most, if not all, countries. This is where it gets complex already, because there might be exceptions to the rule. There are countries which I would say are technically more time consuming, more difficult. Take France as an example. Maybe the Germanys of this world, right? So you're facing a dilemma in a sense that, hey, I want to make a change on a European level, but I have a few slow movers. That's where the decision making comes in, right? What do you do? Do you plan such that you only move as fast as the slowest mover, or do you start breaking up the process, right? Which in our case is what we have typically done, to say, hey guys, we can move ahead with, let's say, 80-90% of the countries, but maybe there's 10-20% out there that we just can't move yet. It gets complex from a legal perspective, because that means if there's 10 or 20% of the countries left, you can obviously not explain that decisions have already been made, because consultation still needs to take place. So we start typically at the European level. Once we get the approval there, then we still have to go to country level. Also an interesting concept, because a lot of our European Works Council members are, of course, part of local country works councils. So in a way that helps if you have the agreement on a European level to go to a country level. But still a lot of times we have to break it up and say, hey guys, we have plans, but these plans need to be approved by labor unions in, let's say, France. So today it's a plan only, as opposed to a fait accompli, something that has already been decided. So to our example, we start European level, we start sequencing down the countries, whereas of course the objective is do as much, if not everything at once, right? Because that's clear in terms of communication, it impacts culture. Why specifically in our organization, our countries are set up in such a way that we have a lot of people reporting to somebody who's not in the same country. That makes it double complex, right? What if I can impact somebody in the Netherlands when in fact their manager sits in France, or vice versa? Our golden rule, of course, is we don't communicate anything as a done fact until consultation is complete, taking very much into account local legislation. That's a long answer to a short question, but I hope that that was a bit clear.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. Absolutely, and I think that there are different approaches possible, and I think that the approach that you have explained is the one that a lot of companies prefer, to have it centralized. We have also done it in phases, where, for example, in the UK, where one know that it can be a lot faster done in the UK. We have seen it also in some projects where they prefer to announce first in, for example, UK and then 1 or 2 other countries, and then postpone the consultation in the other countries, which is also sometimes a possibility in case of, for example, outsourcing projects.
And,
okay.
and I think, just one last point, that to me comes down to size of the organization, complexity of the organization, the impact. To your example, maybe UK is the biggest country in that mold, right? So it really comes down to the details as to what that approach would look like.
So I agree on the fact that there is probably not one strategy possible. There is not one solution and answer. Of course, it must be assessed on a case-by-case basis. But of course, my conclusion is that strategic planning is key. So it is really a matter of understanding precisely what are the constraints in the different countries, what are the consequences and the timings and so on, and then planning your announcements and your consultation processes.
Yeah.
And take into account that if, when it comes to strategic planning, if you approach a European Works Council, you approach them with a definite plan. That doesn't mean that during the consultation, you can all of a sudden change the numbers 3 months down the road, 6 months down the road. So the planning and the sequencing, and therefore the start date of your consultation needs to be very precise, which is tough today to do today in an economy that's strung out by the COVID, right? Because things will change the next quarter or the quarter afterwards. So take that into account as well.
And the timing is crucial, and then the timing depends of course on the legal constraints, but timing, and that's where Roberto can also jump in. Timing also depends on
realistic.
Cultural aspects, and I think there you have some experience with how to explain to, here in your case, the Belgian HQ, how the cultural differences and how what happens in Italy has also an impact, of course, on the timing of such announcement. And I think there, and that's what was the restructuring to which you and Valeria already referred to at the beginning. I think there it's that some thoughts that we can from which we can learn. I think how to take that also into consideration, knowing that it depends, of course, on each country on a country by country basis.
Yeah, for that reason, good preparation and reasonable planning is crucial and must be realistic, because you have to take into account several things. We have had a very long thought and discussion to explain the differences between the countries, different approach, and it's really crucial to have a correct and clear communication flow. What to say, what to communicate, and to who. Because I can give you an example. Of course, most of the company want to talk and announce directly to all the employees, because we want to be transparent, we want to be fair. So we have had a lot of discussion, long discussion, because we need even to protect our managers, which will bring this very tough and sad message. So we have long discussion. Finally, the first agreement was, yes, we announced the 22nd of June, and we stop production. We call all employees all together in a big meeting room, and we announce all of us in front of all employees and explain the reason why we have decided this tough choice. So this was the agreement, but then thanks to the communication flow, we have to inform more or less 2 weeks upfront the chief of police in Toscana region, because they have to know upfront that something will happen and they have to be ready just in case some manifestation, some disorder and whatever. And we went there, and the lady say, guys, are you crazy? You want to do that? You cannot do, otherwise we will be forced to come there and pick you up if we will be still in time. So then finally we went back to top manager, we explained the reasoning and we find a compromise, because in Italy you have to talk to the union. And of course, if you want, you have to talk even with the employees. But first, your communication channel is first union, because they have to discuss and agree with you later on the final agreement. So then we have communicate the agreement, and it was we communicate to the union in the plant instead of industrial employee association. And then from that moment, of course, the chaos started, because union came high level, they stopped the plant immediately, they occupied the plant, the voice was spread, a lot of family members came, the main door was shut off, something like 20 mayors, politician, deputy came in the plant, all mayors of all community next to Filine. So we have the very tough day, because we were they were trying to force us to take back the procedure, the announcement, and look for alternative solution. So it was really tough meetings with the politician, with union, with a lot of stakeholders that day. But finally, we were able to leave the plant just evening late, thanks to the Carabinieri, because we were surrounded by 100, 200, 300 people all around, and it was really tough. So communication, we should look on how to communicate, to who communicate, and even the location, because you have even to protect your manager, which bring this sudden tough message.
Yeah, and if I can just say something, a brief comment is, we as lawyers, we are always concerned when we get the question from the client where they want to inform the employees. We tell them, you know, you need to inform unions first, because there is a legal constraint to inform unions, information consultation procedure with unions. And then I understand the willingness to inform also the employees. This is to, you know, to show that you care about your employees and you want to keep the relationship. But it is extremely difficult to combine the two needs. There are ways, of course, that can be considered, but we are normally concerned mainly by the legal aspects, not to breach the legal procedure, to avoid anti-union behavior. But actually, safety of the managers is also an issue.
Yeah, I think that's there where the two things are come together. Of course, it's the first of all is the preparation, where we have to take into account all the legal aspects, all the legal constraints. We have to take into consideration the human and cultural aspects. As Roberto was saying, that in Italy you have to take care of the fact that there can be, in case of an announcement, that family members come, that majors come into play. So, and that's, I think, where we can skip, and that's also what Roberto was saying, is that besides the preparation on all the legal and the cultural aspects, the second element, which is key for us always in any of such restructurings, is communication. And Valeria already pointed it out. Everybody, of course, thinks about communication to the unions, of course. We also think about communication to the employees, even that I think sometimes there, some employers are a little bit afraid of communicating to the employees. We also have the third parties, which is the institutions. governmental bodies, majors that may have to be involved. And I think then we also have the external stakeholders, the social media, for example, the media itself, where also it should be prepared in advance whether there will be a proactive or a reactive statement towards the media. So I think that were also the four stakeholders, let's say employees, unions, institutions, and social media that have to be tackled, right, Valeria?
And so what, Yuhun, is your experience in communication with employees and unions? And
Sure. I mean, this is the absolute obvious, but communication is key. When we talked about sequencing and planning, part of our planning process is, we involve our communication managers from absolute day one. What we always try to do, because I would say bad news travels fast, we try to stay ahead of the noise. And by that, I mean is we tend to over communicate the things that we can communicate. And by that, I mean is, again, we cannot communicate any decisions have been made during consultations, none of that. But we will communicate along the lines of, we are planning to make some changes, and for that reason, we will be speaking to a European Works Council and or country works council, etc. So we will share as much as we can share within legal boundaries, and we will repeat that as often as we can feel a need to. Again, in that sense, we'd rather over communicate, but that means we're keeping people involved in the different stages of the process, so that at least they know that, hey, in 2 weeks, this meeting will happen. In 4 weeks, we think we'll have some sort of agreement or some sort of statement to share. And in 6 weeks, our CEO will speak to you, so that people at least know what's going on, even if they don't know the end stage of things. And that is what I mean when I say trying to stay ahead of the noise. You never will do that completely right, and there will be rumors floating around which you cannot suppress all the time, but at minimum you can communicate a lot and explain what you can explain, even if it's not that concrete at that point in time. People do have a need to find out where they are, when they will hear something definite, etc. So communication for us, absolute key, and our communication managers, we involve them in the full legal scope of things for that exact reason.
Thank you. And by the way, I would leave for a later moment a discussion about institution and communication to institution. And I would just make a link between what you are what you're saying with another point that we want to discuss that is more related to cultural aspects, if we want. So precisely from a cultural point of view, we see, especially in Italy, unions may have the expectation that you would inform them prior to the project implementation, so prior to the formal information consultation procedure, in a very informal way. And this, of course, can be extremely helpful if you want to build a relationship with the unions, because this can become constructive and useful at a later stage when you are going through the information and consultation procedure. But on the other hand, we know that confidentiality is key in these processes, and leakages can be very disruptive. So the problem is exactly how to find the balance between trying to build a relationship with the unions, which may involve, talking to them in an informal way prior to the process, and the need to keep information confidential and, manage communication the way you want. So what's your this seems to me very much related to what you were saying, Yuhun. So I was wondering, what's your experience in the different countries? So also from a cultural point of view, and what you were able to do in that area.
Oh, you are absolutely right. Listen, I mean, building a relationship means building trust, right? So you want to share as much as you can. We have, in that matter, also found out that leakage happens on the other side of the table, right? Where you feel like, hey, I'm going to share something that's confidential, and still it leaks out. So unfortunately, that's how you learn sometimes, right? So that also means if I put, let's say, the European hat on, as much as I want to share, as much as I can share, I will still take to the legal elements of what I am allowed to share, right? I'm taking our business case in a sense that typically this involves a lot, sometimes almost all European countries. So it's impossible to take a different approach with one labor union in one country versus another one. Why? Because they all meet at a European level. So yes, there's absolutely element of building trust, but there's also learning it the hard way. Hey, there's going to be leakage, and I think at minimum, you or the company doesn't want to be the party that has leaked. If the other side leaked, there's only so much you can do, but it cannot be us. Why? Because on the back end of the process, these labor unions, work councils will come back and basically throw that in your face, right? Hey, your decision has already been made. And that's absolutely the last thing that you want in any type of consultation, right? That's just going to hurt you. That's going to delay the process, and that's going to create bad blood. So we definitely stay away from that one.
I think in Belgium, it's also more or less the case that although I do know that some HR managers prefer informing upfront the spokespersons, let's say, of the union, but we also tend to try to push it a little bit back to the day of the announcement and try to, of course, put it there in the roadmap on the day of the announcement. That it should be added there somewhere, some 10 minutes to inform also directly, to pick up the phone and to contact the unions directly. And by doing so, we have seen that they also appreciate that you do it on the same day. Whilst I think some years ago, it was more the idea and the tendency to inform them already upfront in a very informal way, of course, because it remains from a legal point of view, it remains rather dangerous if there would be a leak. As Jeroen pointed out. So while now we try to have it planned on the day of the announcement, that there you keep all stakeholders, including the unions, informed.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And that, Roberto, I seem to remember, was also the solution that you adopted. So in a way, inform them in advance, but not much in advance. It was maybe the same day, but just a few hours before, just for them not to.
Yeah, we have deeply discussed this matter because, if you want to build a good relationship and if you want them cooperating later after the announcement, would be better to inform them upfront. But it really depends on the person or the people which you have in front, the level of the union which you are talking to. So we were looking to inform, because we have more branches in Italy, 3 branches in fact for Figline. But finally we have decided to avoid to inform them upfront, because we were really having fear of leakages, and this could affect heavily your process and your communication flow. So what we have decided, the compromise was to, yes, inform them upfront, but just half an hour, 1 hour before the kickoff meeting. So they appreciate, but anyway, after the announcement, it was really tough discussion.
It didn't make the
so
difference.
You have to balance if you want them cooperating, but with the risk of leakages. So we have chosen the second one.
Mm-hmm. Yes. And actually with institutions, and the reason why I mention institutions is because in Italy, in huge restructurings, they often jump in and they become part of the discussion, of the negotiation, although they are not formally, part of the negotiation, and they don't have a formal role into the pieces of legislation in collective redundancies. So institutions often jump in, and they seem to work as sort of mediators in those processes, and they often say they expect to be informed first. So in many cases, actually employers don't, because again, there is a huge risk of leakages, and it depends. It's not a rule, but it's difficult to say that would really help you if you do so, meaning that it would be easier to go through the process. On the other hand, it may be considered that if you inform institutions first and they suggest different actions and they suggest different paths, it may be difficult afterwards not to consider the recommendations that they give. So that's why it's very problematic, and each time you need to consider the different scenarios, but very often employers are told you didn't inform us before, so why didn't you? And that becomes, something that from a political point of view becomes a leverage for them. Do you have anything like this in your experience, Jeroen?
Institutions maybe a little bit less. Again, we always abide in that sense, maybe conservative, but strictly by the law, right? We share what we can share at the moment it is approved, right? And that means you can always go back into a discussion, into a negotiation to say, hey, we did not share this with you because it hadn't been agreed yet. It had not been approved yet, right? So as long as we stick to a few simple legal rules in a sense that can't share what we cannot share yet because it hasn't been approved, maybe not at a European level, on a country level, etc. At least you can always have a clear face, look them in the eye and say, guys, we've stuck to the law, right? The moment that line gets blurry, you come into a gray area that I think you might sink in at the back end. It might turn out good, might not turn out good. But for us, it's absolutely very clear to stay 100% compliant and to absolutely keep the company safe, right? And the risk of leakage, specifically if you're targeting sometimes hundreds, thousands of people at the same time, it's just too big, right? So you always need to be able to go back and say, guys, this is what we officially communicated, this is what we did not communicate. So stay compliant, stay safe has always been our golden rule, and it has served us well in the past.
And Ewan, does that also mean, and maybe it's the same question also for Roberto, does that also mean that with regard to the unions, as we know, sometimes there can be a parallel consultation? What I mean is that you have the consultation around the table where everybody is present, but you can also have the consultation in the corridors, in the back scene, where, and then it's typically also think in Belgium, where that kind of context might be more important than what is said around the table, where everybody's present and everybody wants to be the tough guy, while it's in the back scene that sometimes the real progress is made.
Listen, I think, to your point, it's a feeling out process, right? Any consultation is, that's the way I see it, right? And personally, I very much respect the labor unions, and I respect what they want to do, what they need to do, right? Which is keep as many employees employed, and if that's not a possibility, get the best deal out of there, right? That's fair, that's their job, and I have my job to do, right? And if that means, to your point, when we leave the formal table and we have a cup of coffee during our break and find out what it is they really want, that's okay, right? If that's part of the process, if that's part of, let's say, your cultural process as well, very specifically, which might not apply to all countries, very much in favor.
Yeah, I can only agree, because most of the time you are progressing more during the informal meeting than instead of the official meeting around the table. As far as I remember, Valeria, even the agreement we did in Roma, almost all discussions were done in small separate groups, and then the solution was just brought at the end, and where all the people were around the table, but none of them decide, just the discussion and decision was made up front. So I'm completely right, and you can have a better progress during the informal meeting, so we know what we need all together, and then when we are around the table, we come up with that solution, and all stakeholders can just only agree because the agreement was done up front.
Yes, and also you need to take into account relationship among the different unions, which are not always very transparent. And so sometimes you have a public discussion, a public negotiation, then you have some unions coming up and saying something against and different against the other unions. So they have a different approach in private. So this is definitely, these are dynamics very important to take into account for the success and the outcome of your negotiation. And with the institutions, it's the same. So they have, a public talk, and then they try, of course, to achieve their own goals and also support your restructuring. They try to have conversations to find solutions, and they are much more flexible in this kind of private talks. So this is definitely a cultural aspect that you need to, I think, explore beforehand and prepare. And I really appreciate when clients being conscious of those differences try to prepare for that. So even the people who are going, the managers who come from other countries and know that they are the ones going to negotiate and talk to the institutions and on, they really try to prepare, and they get trainings to communicate differently, because I think, I mean, this is my experience, a Dutch communicates differently than an Italian, with institutions and politicians and unions. So it is very important, I think, for the good outcome of the process to try to prepare properly for those processes. I would like to address a question, and we still have time, but because it is a very broad question and it involves, in my view, many implications, I would try to use it for the discussion. The question is, what do you think are the concrete risks of already informing impacted employees before the Works Council advisory process is completed? So already let the impacted employees know that they are expected to be redundant, with the comment that this is still subject to reservation and the final impact will be decided and communicated after the Works Council process. My experience is that sometimes workers' councils also want to talk to these employees and ask these inputs. So I have a preliminary comment, and then of course I ask you, Juan and Roberti, to tell what they think. But my point is that we are here talking about a situation where you have already started, if I understand well, the legal procedure. So you have started a process which is not completed, and that would be a case. Even different would be a case where you want to share information with the impacted employees even before you have formally started the process. So even in the first scenario, that is less risky in a way, so where you want to talk to the employees before the process is over, there is a risk, because in most of the countries, the people to be dismissed are to be selected based on a certain number of selection criteria that can vary from country to country, can be legal criteria, can be criteria established with the unions in a potential agreement with the unions. But as a matter of fact, normally you cannot say since the beginning, I would dismiss A and B and C. You can say the redundant roles are the following, but then the dismissal of the individual is a separate thing. So talking to the employees before the process is over can be, a breach of this, and in any case, a potential breach of unions' rights, because they are the ones negotiating the criteria. They are the ones with whom you need to consult. So talking to the employees directly, it may be a breach. Sometimes, as you seem to say, this can be in agreement with the unions in a way. So this can be a situation where unions are happy to try to find possibly volunteers for the dismissals and so on. So it can be the actual situation may vary. Another thing is if you even want to talk to the employees before the process is started, in which case, in my opinion, the potential breach is even more serious, because again, you're going to talk to the employees before you talk to the unions, and that would definitely be a breach of the union's right to be, the one that receive your information and consultation procedure. Yuhun, do you have experience in these, attempt to reach out to the employees before the process is over to, find solutions?
Listen, I get it. Obviously, it's very tempting, right? And the one thing that sticks in this question is the amount of time that the employees have to wait to get a final answer. So that I fully get. Again, might sound a bit repetitive, but I would look at the sequencing of the legal aspects. Are you allowed to do so? If the answer is no, my answer would be no. Now, if I turn back to my earlier reply, to me, that raises the question, what are you allowed to communicate today, right? You're always allowed to communicate some aspects, even if it's not too concrete, right? If the answer is, hey guys, we're sitting down with these labor union next Friday and the Friday afterwards to come to a solution, and only then can we communicate as much as you can, but I would say don't break those rules up front, right? Before going into labor consultation with any other labor union. I think it will just hurt you more in the back end. It will slow down the process. It's a violation of law in almost all countries, I would say. So I would say stay away from that. I know it's tempting, but my clear guidance would say no, don't go there.
What?
Well, I think indeed for us it's the same. we will always push that backwards because we will even try to use it in order to fasten the consultation procedure, because everybody knows that the personnel is waiting for answers, is waiting to know who will be impacted and what will be, if impacted, what will be the package that comes with the restructuring. And that's something that we tend to use against the unions to say, look, the faster the consultation can be terminated, the faster we can communicate to the personnel, and the less unrest there will be, the less questions there will be. So it's more in that way that we will use it, and that's both strategic advice, but also a legal advice, of course, because indeed you cannot share information with the employees, which you have not shared yet with the Works Council during the consultation process. So you should keep the timeline correct in the legal way for us. Absolutely.
So I hope, Lisette, that we answered your question, but feel free to put follow-up questions if you need. So do you have experience? This is another question coming in. Thanks, Lisette. So Yuhun, for instance, what's your experience, if any, with online consultation, but at local and European level? So did you experience the consultation online?
Yes, I think with a popular vote, they call it a new way of working, right? It is what it is. I'm in the Netherlands. I'm not allowed to meet up with more than two other people today. So by default, if I need to do consultation now, it will be done online. I mean, I just had a consultation with some Swedish labor union reps 2 weeks ago through Zoom, right? It's not ideal because I like to sit in a room and look at body language as much as I, hear the answers. But, it is what it is. And I think it's an extension of where we are working today. I look at my own situation. We're working from home for 9 months and we'll continue to do so for quite some time. But the work and the business just continues. So I think we are adapting. The labor unions are adapting. And I have to say, to their credit, they have been quite flexible in that one.
Yeah, I have to say that also in Italy, consultation online works extremely well, and I didn't expect so, but since March, when additional tools were introduced to support companies, very fast consultation processes were required, and this happened through online tools, platforms, and so on. And I didn't expect unions to be so prepared to join and use it. So they were equipped and very flexible. So actually, my personal experience was very positive. Roberto, did you? I mean, you also had experience.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, of course. I would rather prefer to have a live meeting, live discussion, because face-to-face body language is crucially important. But anyway, due or thanks to this COVID situation, we were forced to do, and frankly speaking, it's working quite well. I was positively surprised. Yeah,
it's true. And also with the politicians, I have to say, they are quite accessible and they are equipped, and they are easily reachable through online tools and available to discuss on WebEx or Zoom and so on. We have answered a couple of questions. I think we have 1 minute left. So I would just use this moment to, if you want to convey any special message to the audience, any takeaway that you want to leave.
Let me say three words that I have learned here today during the session. For me is the preparation, as Roberto was saying. Then what Irene is saying, once you start over communication, communication, and then what I also hear is be consistent, be compliant and be consistent, keep your line. And I think that especially if you have to manage a lot of jurisdictions, that's something to take away.
Yes. Proper preparation, very careful preparation, fine-tuning, and strategic planning, especially if you have many jurisdictions. Know about the culture.
Absolutely.
So thank you very much. Thank you, Jeroen.
Thank
Thank
you.
you. Thank you all. You're
Pleasure.
welcome.
Everyone in the audience, we were happy to address your questions and happy that we were able to share our experience with you.
Thank
Thank
you
you.
all. Bye
Bye.
Bye,
bye.
everybody. Bye-bye. Have a nice
Thank
afternoon.
you, guys. Thank you, the panelists. So we have now reached the end of this session, but the Legal HR Summit is not over yet, as we will have many other sessions coming up today. Finally, I would like to thank everyone for attending this session, and thanks also to our panelists for their important insights. So with that, this session will now be ending. I hope to see you at the next one.
Thank you very much.
Thank
Thank you.
you. Bye
Bye.
bye.